working from home right now. I'm Steven. I'm the Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey Coordinator at the Delaware Department of Agriculture. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you about spotted lanternfly. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about this in the past, but I've added some new information in here that even I've learned over the past few weeks. Some new information coming out about this insect. It is our most pressing invasive species concern in Delaware that we're worried about at the Department of Agriculture. So the spotted lanternfly, we've all seen this guy before. It's, you know, has those bright red wings with black spots on them. So it is a plant hopper that's originally from China, India, Vietnam. It was introduced to a few different countries, specifically South Korea, where it spread all over the country and has become a pretty important pest in grapes there. It was also introduced to Japan, and it was introduced here. It was found in 2014. It was probably introduced a few years before that. The population had to grow before we were able to identify it. So the initial survey, when it was found in Pennsylvania, it was kind of contained to about 4 different counties there: Berks, Montgomery, Bucks County, and Chester County. So we think it was introduced through the trade. There was a business there that received some material from China, some decorative paving stones or something like that for the landscape. And there was probably an egg mass on one of these stones. And in the springtime, they hatched out. The nymphs flew away, started living in the environment. And after a few years, the population grew to a point where it did spread to these 4 counties. So that was in 2014. Or 2015 is when these 4 counties were identified to have spotted lanternfly. And in that time, about 4.5 years, now these are the counties where we know that spotted lanternfly is. So you can see it's spread over all of southeastern Pennsylvania. There's a small population out there in Pittsburgh, way to the west. There's a small population in Winchester, Virginia, and of course, it's just spread south into Newcastle County. It's also in Maryland and New Jersey. Now, these are the most official counties, but we know that it's probably in every county, or at least a few more counties in New Jersey. We haven't seen it any further south than just a little past the canal in Delaware. So it's not in all of Newcastle County yet, but we're kind of afraid that it's getting there. We'll see what happens this year. All right. So we know that there's 1 generation per year. This time of year in May, the eggs are hatching out, and we're probably gonna see the first instars. So in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and I think New Jersey, they've reported seeing first instar nymphs. Now, we haven't actually seen any in the field yet, but we're pretty sure they've hatched out. It could just be, you know, we're not looking in the right places or anything like that. But we know that they're starting to hatch out. They'll grow through the summer, and by July, they'll start turning into adults. So they start out without wings. Then in July, as an adult, they'll have wings. They'll become much more mobile. They'll spread throughout the environment, and then they'll start to lay eggs in September. They'll lay eggs for several months between September and November, and then when it gets too cold, all the adults will die, but the egg masses will survive the winter and then hatch out the next spring. So this is what the adult usually looks like. We're kind of familiar seeing the pictures of them with their spread wings, and you can see the red underwings with the black spots. But most of the time you'll see them sitting like this with their wings closed. They're a little more camouflaged, I think, when they're sitting on a tree trunk or a branch. But this is what they kind of look like, a moth or a butterfly, but they're a plant hopper. And we know that they will congregate in massive numbers on trees that they prefer. So this is a black cherry tree. This was taken in Pennsylvania a few years ago. And this tree is just covered in them. Even, you know, individual trees of the same species would be more preferred than others. So, you know, there could be a black cherry tree right next to this one that maybe they don't like as much. So they all congregate on this one tree. You can kind of see in the background, if you look on that little toy car, there's a few sitting on the wheels. So they'll just get all over the place. And this is where it becomes a homeowner concern. People want to enjoy their yards, and it's hard to, you know, enjoy that in the summertime, especially, you know, someplace like Pennsylvania where they might only get a few good months out of the year before it gets too snowy and cold to really enjoy their yard. And if your trees and your entire yard are covered in thousands of spotted lanternfly, it's hard to enjoy the outdoors when that's happening. They'll lay their egg masses on practically any smooth, hard surface. They'll lay them on telephone poles, wooden posts in vineyards. That's been a problem, especially since they favor feeding on grape plants. You know, rusty metal they really like. So, you know, metal fences, 55-gallon drums, or playground equipment. As you can see, this person has some, it looks like a slide or something, and there's those gray splotches on the steps that are egg masses. So what if this person, you know, decided that they're selling their house, they're moving to a different state or something? If they're packing up this toy to move with them, they could accidentally be spreading the spotted lanternfly to a different state. So education is really important, especially to the general public, to stop the spread of this. Teach people how they can, you know, simply check and inspect their the things in their yard before they move them around to make sure that they scrape egg masses and stop the spread as best they can. This is a video of a spotted lanternfly that we caught laying an egg mass. So it should play. I'm gonna see if I can end the show, and maybe I'll play this way. No, it says that it's not playing. Oh well, we'll skip that. It's just kind of gross watching them. They've already laid this. This spotted lanternfly had already laid the eggs, and now it was covering it with that gray kind of putty that it does. So we'll just start the slide and move on. It's not super important that. I just thought it was really interesting to watch them in action. Okay, so the nymphs. This is the life stage that they'll be at when they feed on the most different kinds of plants. We know that they feed on about 70 or more different plants. It's probably really hard to find something that they won't feed on. As nymphs, that's a basil plant to the left. In the center there, of course, is Tree of Heaven. And this is when you'll find them on the most things in your yard. They'll feed on different kinds of you know, decorative plants, different kinds of trees, things like that. And of course, they're going to look for the really soft, tender shoots to feed on as a nymph. And then as they grow, they'll start feeding almost exclusively on Tree of Heaven, along with some other different plants. There are some insects that could look like spotted lanternfly. We get public reports all the time for them, and most of the time they're correct. Every now and then we get something that is not spotted lanternfly, especially in Kent or Sussex County, where we've not seen spotted lanternfly before. It's not uncommon for people to send us, pictures of box elder bugs. Those are very common. We get a lot. They're bright red and they kind of congregate in large groups on box elder trees. We've gotten a few tiger moths. I haven't gotten so many leopard moths here, but we do get those underwing moths, like tiger moths with the red wings like that. So just be careful. It's good to know exactly what you're looking for, but we take all reports seriously, especially if they're in one of the counties where we haven't seen them yet. We really want to catch them as soon as we can. The damage that they cause, they are piercing, sucking insects, So they'll be sucking the juices from the trees, and you can see this is a tree of heaven with some adults on it, and it's just oozing sap down the trunk, and they'll create honeydew. They're ingesting this high sugary sap, and it's coming out so forcefully from the tree that it is expelled very forcefully from their rear end. It's a very sugary excrement called honeydew, and that'll land on anything that's underneath it. They'll land on leaves, and then that sugary honeydew will promote the growth of sooty mold on the leaves, which could affect photosynthesis. I'm not sure how much research has been done on exactly how badly this effect of spotted lanternfly causes to plants, but it's not a big concern, I think, for researchers right now. I think there's some consensus that this is not the worst thing to happen to the plant. It looks bad, and of course, the honeydew, it's not just going to be on plants, it's going to be on anything that's underneath the tree that they're feeding on. So steps, deck, cars, anything that you might keep around your house that is underneath a tree could be just covered in this sticky honeydew. So that's pretty gross, another homeowner concern. But why we really care about it is the economic damage that it can cause to a few crops. So right now there's not been any economic damage reported on any other crops besides grapes. In 2017, one vineyard reported that there was up to a 90% decrease in their harvestable grapes on about 40 acres of planting. That's just about the grapes that they were able to harvest. And now Pennsylvania says that about 80 acres total for all years, about 80 acres have been completely destroyed by spotted lanternfly. And this is in Pennsylvania. So what we see is we're seeing grapevines that are totally defoliated. They're not surviving the winter, and they're not producing grapes. So this is a big concern for Pennsylvania and for a lot of other states as well. We do see them feeding on other plants and causing dieback, like black walnuts. But their effect on grapes is really dramatic. There's been some research, it's been a few years since they've been here, so we're just starting to understand really what their effects are on grapevines. This is from a paper called Evaluating the Impacts of Spotted Lanternfly on Grapevine Health. You can see the title down at the bottom. So they've excluded vines and introduced specific numbers of spotted lanternflies to each vine, and then they studied how the vines react to that. So they found that as they increase the number of spotted lanternfly on the vines, they do see a decrease in the carbon assimilation and photosynthesis. So they're not associating that decrease in photosynthesis with the sooty mold growth on the leaves. I think you may have seen me give this presentation before and talk about the sooty mold possibly affecting the photosynthesis, but now they're not suggesting that that causes the decrease in photosynthesis, but it's actually just the feeding on the plants. There's also a decrease in sap flow, a decrease in the sugar content of the grapes, and a decrease in the freeze tolerance of the buds. So it's actually becoming harder for the vines to overwinter. There's also been some research about the density of spotted lanternfly in vineyards. So they've kind of determined that, as you can see, in the earlier in the year it is, there's not going to be a lot of spotted lanternfly in the vineyards, but then it kind of grows and peaks in September and then drops off again really quick, probably as the vines start losing leaves and desiccating because of the time of year. But they've also found that the closer you are in the vineyard to a wooded edge, the more spotted lanternfly there's going to be. So they're not all over the vineyard, they're only going to be close to the woods. So that kind of gives them some idea that they can recommend to vineyard owners that they might not have to treat their entire vineyard. They could just, target specific spots, and that would, give them a better control for less cost. And right now, we're all focused on the tree of heaven. So, this is another invasive species. It was introduced many, many years ago and has spread all through the country. It grows practically anywhere, but this gives us an opportunity to attack spotted lanternfly because for a lot of the year, it is actually feeding on the tree of heaven. So we're able to use that to our advantage. Last year, we've received lots and lots of public reports, not surprised. In 2018, that was our first year. We were just inundated with calls from the public, as well as our own visual surveys, and we saw about a 51% increase in the area that we considered to be infested. So this was early last year, March 2019. We had 11 zip codes that we considered to be under quarantine that had a large spotted lanternfly presence. And then by September, we had increased that. We found them all over Newcastle County above the canal, and I'm reporting this here. It's not big news, but we have started seeing around last October, November, we did start seeing a few individuals just south of the canal going towards Middletown, but we haven't seen any past there. We haven't actually seen any in Middletown proper, just up a little north of there along 896. We started seeing a few. So we're really cautious about that. What you guys can do to help. The number one thing that we're telling everybody is kill as many spotted lanternfly as you can. We know it's hard if you have favorable trees in yards, like you have some property that has tree of heaven on it, that gives you an opportunity to, perhaps reduce the population of spotted lanternfly by taking control in your own hands. You can apply insecticides to the trees. And if you just see a random spotted lanternfly on your property, definitely kill it first. If you're in a county, if you're in Sussex County or Kent County or something where we haven't seen it before, definitely kill it. Take a photo of it. Send it to us. We'll definitely take that report seriously. Check your vehicles. If you're going to Newcastle County in the summer or the early fall, before you leave, make sure that you're wiping off the spotted lanternfly that might be clinging to your bumper or somewhere else in your car. Make sure that you keep your windows closed so that they're not flying inside. If you find egg masses on trees, take a few minutes to scrape them off. An egg mass can hold 30 to 50 eggs in them. So each time you scrape an egg mass, it is killing 30 to 50 spotted lanternfly. As I said, if you're outside the quarantine area, take a photo, report a location or an address. The more specific you can be about where you've seen this thing, the better, because we need to be able to follow up and try to determine where the population of spotted lanternfly is in the state. Okay, so this is our reporting site. You can find it by going to www.de.gov/hitchhikerbug, or you could go to the Department of Agriculture website, and they have a search function there. If you search for spotted lanternfly, it'll come up this homepage. It gives you some guidelines for detection and reporting. Currently, we're updating this now with some newer information, specifically about the quarantine. We know that that is growing, and it's been several months since this has been updated. So we're trying to include new information. Hopefully, we'll be able to provide some links to the new site, to University of Delaware Extension Service or things like that, that they'll be able to post that somewhere on their site. And you'll just be able to link straight to this one. Some other things that we have in mind. But on this website, you can go on, you can learn a lot of information about spotted lanternfly. And we have a reporting tool where you can report all this online. Of course, we have emails that you can send it to. We have an email that's just hitchhikerbug@delaware.gov. That's our email address. There's my email address where people can report sightings to. But this will, this is an online tool that will take your name, your email address, and the address of the location where you found it and plot it on a map. So that gives us a lot of information to know where it's spreading in the state, and we're able to access this map and see exactly how many reports we get every week. Options for control, tree banding. So tree banding would be done on a site that we know is infested in spotted lanternfly. And this is actually both a control option as well as like a data collection tool. So we're able to see how many spotted lanternfly we're actually affecting. Also, for some property owners that might not like the idea of having chemicals sprayed on their property, and it will catch anything, but it's really good at catching spotted lanternfly. There's some problems with bycatch. You could be catching other insects. There were some reports, if you have a very strong glue on the tape, that you could catch small animals like frogs, snakes, squirrels. But there are some ways that you could prevent that from happening. You could cut the band in half and make it narrower so that it's less likely to capture those other creatures while still catching massive numbers of spotted lanternfly. There's also a lot of chemical control options. Spotted lanternfly are really easy to kill. There's a lot of different chemicals that you can use, and they work. You can kill hundreds or thousands of spotted lanternflies by treating the right tree. And we have all that information too, some chemical recommendations on our website at agriculture.delaware.gov /spotted lanternfly. That's the website that you'll go to if you type in de.gov/hitchhiker-bug. You can also go to that website that you see on the screen right now. We do want to caution people about home remedies. There's a lot of information out on the website, a lot from not reputable sources. Definitely don't want to use a flamethrower or fire or anything like that. That's very dangerous. Homemade mixtures involving dish soap, vinegar, chili peppers, things like that. That could cause a lot of harm to plants or even humans. A lot of these homemade remedies, they've not been tested like pesticides have. There aren't any law, it could be illegal even to apply some home remedies to the environment. So be very careful about that. We do not suggest any homemade remedies that take care of spotted lanternflies. Some things like people will go out with a shop vac and vacuum up all the spotted lanternflies that they can see. That, there's kind of a continuum of like what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. That might be a little more acceptable than going out and spraying something with dish soap or chili peppers or something like that. But be very, very cautious about where you're getting your information. Stick to reputable websites like the Extension Service website or the Department of Agriculture, of course. Again, options for control. This is how we're targeting the spotted lanternfly. Is we're targeting the tree of heaven. We know that they love feeding on tree of heaven, so we'll remove a majority of the tree of heaven using herbicide. People, the owners of the property, can opt to cut them down. We at the department, we just use herbicide, kill the small trees, and then on the large trees, we use a systemic insecticide. And that will kill all the spotted lanternfly when they congregate. So this is a little cartoon visual about how we do this. So we find a stand. We know that some of these trees are tree of heaven, some of them are other trees. So we'll remove all the 90% of the tree of heaven is what Pennsylvania's Department of Agriculture does. What we do is we just kill all the small trees. So anything less than 6 inches in diameter, we'll kill with a herbicide. And any tree that's larger than 6 inches in diameter, we'll treat with an insecticide. We know that the spotted lanternfly like feeding on larger trees as they grow, as opposed to the smaller ones. So we'll reduce the population. When the spotted lanternfly come in, they'll congregate on these larger trees, which are now poisoned, and they'll all die. So that's the tactic that we're doing. Something else that you guys can do, I touched on this before, is be conscious of some biosecurity. So biosecurity is just a way that you can prevent the spread of spotted lanternfly. So we know that it's an active hitchhiker. It makes use of human modes of transportation. They'll just cling to a car as it's barreling down the highway at 60 miles an hour. We have had some reports of someone getting home, getting out, calling us because they saw a spotted lanternfly on their bumper, and they're in Newcastle County in Delaware, and they were just visiting their family in Pennsylvania or something. So they literally crossed the state boundary with a spotted lanternfly probably clinging to the side of their car. So again, if you're visiting a quarantined area and you're about to leave, give your car a quick once over, make sure that your swiping or sweeping off any spotted lanternfly that might be on it. From mid-September through the spring, we know that the egg masses are going to be laid on everything. So that's why it's important for businesses to check their products before they move and to obtain a spotted lanternfly permit from us. That will show other states when they cross state borders. They could be stopped at a truck stop, and some states are now enforcing the quarantine laws. So if you don't have a spotted lanternfly permit from the Department of Agriculture, your shipment could be turned away. It's important to store materials in a way that the spotted lanternfly can't get to them, either inside, underneath a tarp, something like that. Don't put anything underneath a tree line where spotted lanternfly could be congregating. And again, before moving equipment or supplies from an infested area, inspect it, destroy any egg masses, and destroy any adults that you might see. The egg masses can be scraped off with any kind of hard material. You can use a knife. This photo here is using a little twig or a stick to just scrape the egg mass off into a bottle. You seal the bottle, throw it away. You can scrape them off into a plastic bag, or you could do a really good job of squishing the eggs. But if you could just like scrape the eggs and they could fly off and land on the ground and you'll never see them again. They could still hatch out in the springtime. But if you're actively crushing the eggs underfoot or with something like a putty knife, that would destroy the viability of the eggs. Again, biosecurity covers so many different kinds of objects, from cars to construction equipment, horse trailers, boats, campers. This insect could be on anything and be moved from one place to another, unintentionally. We don't think anyone's purposefully spreading this thing around, but it's important to do your part to make sure that you're not spreading this. The spotted lanternfly quarantine, it covers all life stages that you could move. It doesn't just cover the adults, but it covers the eggs, the nymphs, everything like that. We hope that it will limit the movement of commodities that might have spotted lanternfly on them, but still continue people's ability to conduct business, trade with other countries or states. It just requires a little more work, some inspections to make sure that they're moving everything safely. And there's more information about that on our website as well. Okay, I also wanted to put in a few slides on this guy. It made the news last weekend. It is not the murder hornet. The murder hornet is not an acceptable common name. It is the Asian giant hornet. It is pretty nasty. So we actually have an insect here in Delaware right now. This is kind of frozen on me. There we go. So in Delaware, we actually have the European hornet. That's also a not native species. It was introduced, many, many years ago. And it's pretty common. You can see it can get about an inch long or so. So it's also a large hornet. The Asian giant hornet, imagine it being even larger than the European hornet. You can also tell by the markings that they look a little different. The European hornet kind of has like those little like black spots going along the abdomen, where the Asian giant hornet doesn't have those. So if you see a big old hornet flying around this summer, it's probably going to be the European hornet and not the Asian giant hornet. So there's no reason to panic. But of course, if you do suspect that it is something different, take a photo, submit it to the Department of Agriculture, and we'll take a look at it. Currently, there have only been 2 individual giant hornets found in the United States. And they are, you almost can't get farther away from Delaware and still be in the same country. You can see those red dots, those red stars on the border of Canada. So two, I think they were both dead individuals, were found late last year in the fall. I think it was November or December or something like that when they were found. They were found by public reports, just like some homeowners saw this weird dead insect on their porch and they were like, oh, what the heck is that? And they were, they were keen enough to take a photo of it, submit it to the Washington Department of Agriculture, and they were able to identify it as actually being the Asian giant hornet. There was actually a nest in Vancouver. You can see that red star up over the border across the Strait of Georgia. You can see that red star. That was actually a nest of these Asian giant hornets that were destroyed last year by the Vancouver authorities or the Canadian Department of Agriculture or something like that. But right now, we know that there's only been 2 individuals found in the United States. This is data taken from the Washington's Department of Agriculture website. All those different colored dots on the map are reports from the public of Asian giant hornets, but all the ones that are orange, we know that those dots are not Asian giant hornet, either from samples or from a photograph. A lot of the other ones have been unprocessed or they don't have a photograph associated with them or things like that. So it's really hard to tell, but it doesn't look like they've spread. They're not all over the state, and we're pretty sure that they're not in Delaware yet, but we're taking everything seriously. And the reason that we would be worried about this is because, the hornets are predaceous, and the Asian giant hornet, it's predaceous on a lot of different insects, but in the fall, in September, October, it will just decimate honeybee hives. So there are 3 phases of Asian giant hornet attack. The first phase, they call it hawking or hunting. So this will be most of the year when they're active. They'll be flying around, hunting down individual insects. They could be honeybees, they could be other things like caterpillars or other kind of insects. And they'll attack those insects and bring them back to feed their larvae. But eventually, they'll kind of just focus on honeybee hives. And if there's a honeybee hive available, then they go into this, what they call the slaughter phase. So in the late summer or fall, a group of hornets will hone in on a honeybee hive and they'll infiltrate it and attack all the adult bees and not, bring them back for food. They'll just kill these bees by like decapitation and just leave a pile of dead bees outside the hive. And then they'll use the hive as sort of a grocery store, if you will. They'll come and go, wander around as they please, and they'll take the larva or the pupa of the honeybees and bring those back to their own nest to feed their young. So that they've seen, they're afraid of that effect that they can have on honeybees. In France, this was another Asian hornet that was introduced to Europe. It's called the Asian hornet, Vespa velutina. It spreads about 60 kilometers or 40 miles a year from where it was initially introduced to. And some beekeepers there in Europe, they've seen about 30% of their honeybee hives have been affected, and that some people have seen a 2/3 reduction in honey from some beekeepers. So we know that bees and pollinators are really getting hit hard by a lot of different things. The population of honeybees has kind of collapsed recently. So just this one more stress, it would not be good. So that's why we're mostly worried about it. Of course, there is the human health concern as well. The Asian giant hornet has a pretty nasty sting. We know that mass attacks are rare. You know, we don't call them the murder hornet. You know, and like, I don't condone the use of the term murder hornet, but it's not because they murder people, but because they probably murder honeybees. They are not going to go out and indiscriminately attack people. Mass attacks are rare, and usually it's because they're defending a nest or a honeybee hive that they've invaded. You know, if they, you know, if a honeybee or a beekeeper gets too close to one of these hives that they might have invaded, they could be attacked, and a normal bee suit isn't strong enough to withstand their sting. Their stinger could be like a 1/4 inch long. They can sting repeatedly. Their venom, I've read that it's worse than other Hymenoptera. Extremely painful. It can cause localized tissue necrosis or death, which is the most likely outcome. And if you're allergic to bee stings or things like that, it could cause anaphylactic shock, some other pretty nasty effects. So definitely you would not want to be stung by one of these. So if you do suspect that you have something that looks like the Asian giant hornet, you know, don't get too close, stand back, take a photo, but don't panic. So that's what we say. If you think that you have a nest, or even that you just see one individual, you know, stay as far away as possible while still trying to get, you know, a good picture. That's easy for me to say if I'm not the one taking the photo. But you know, we do want to get reports from the public if they think that they've seen an Asian giant hornet. So, you know, do what you can. We have been getting some reports, actually not as many as I thought we would. Over the past week and a half or so, we've gotten probably 20 or so reports at the Department of Agriculture. Most of them have been the European hornet that we've been able to verify with photographs. Some of them have been other kinds of wasps or things like that. So that's the end of my presentation. Of course, there's my name, my phone number. That is my direct line if you guys have any questions or comments. That's the email address. Oh, I need to update that email address. So our email address now is hitchhikerbug@delaware.gov. So instead of state.de.us, it is Delaware, you spell out the word Delaware.gov. And you know, I'll make this presentation into a PDF, email it to Tracy, and she can distribute it to the rest of you guys. So you'll have it as a reference if you like. Yeah, so I'd be happy to
Steve,
take.
there was a question.
Yeah.
There was a question from Chris Dominic. He asked, are they ground nesters?
Yes, Asian giant hornets are ground nesters typically. There might be some occasions where they will nest in a tree or like a fallen log or something like that, but they are apparently ground nesters. Yeah, and they will nest in, their nest could be rather pretty large, subterranean. There are some photos that I've seen online of, you know, these nests that are just absolutely massive, and it does take, you know, some special equipment to get in there, destroy the nest, and you know, it was introduced, I think, to a few other countries. I know in Japan they've lived with them. I can't remember. There might be a subspecies that's native to Japan, but I know that they, you know, typically are considered a pest there because of their effect on honeybees, even though they're native. Asian honeybees have developed a kind of defense mechanism against the Asian giant hornet. So in Asian honeybees, when an Asian giant hornet infiltrates the hive, the Asian honeybees could actually, they'll all attack at once. So there'll be like a mass attack of the honeybees attacking the hornet, and they'll clump around the hornet, completely engulf it in honeybees, and the honeybees will just like vibrate their muscles. This is really interesting. And they'll heat up this ball of honeybees, will heat up with the hornet in the middle, and the hornet can only withstand a temperature that's like 1 or 2 degrees cooler than what the honeybees can actually withstand. So the honeybees will, they'll vibrate and they'll get up to like 117 degrees Fahrenheit inside this ball just from vibrating. And the hornet will die because it can't withstand that temperature, but the honeybees can withstand that temperature up to like 118 degrees Fahrenheit or something. So they'll actually be able to defend against the honeybees, or against the hornets. Here in the United States, we mostly have European honeybees, so they haven't evolved that sort of defense mechanism. Yeah, so in Japan, that was kind of a tangent, but yeah, in Japan, they search out these nests that are underground and they try to destroy them because they could still affect the honeybee hives. Are there any more questions?
So one question is, what do the nests look like? So is it just a large opening in the ground, or
Yeah, they're not solitary. So typically you'll see one opening in the ground. I didn't include any pictures, but I had seen pictures online last week when I was making this. There will be a hole in the ground. It could be like, at the base of a tree or something like that. And yeah, all the insects will kind of go in through the same entrance hole.
Heike just shared, there's a great video online of a praying mantis eating an Asian giant hornet. You need to share that, Heike. That would be cool to put in a newsletter. One other question, any application that could be sprayed on the ground to kill them?
I do not know the answer to that question. I could, of course, like research it and email Tracy perhaps a follow-up. I think there are some chemical controls that can be used. Of course, we would not suggest just a homeowner going, if they suspect that they have a nest of Asian giant hornets, I would not suggest trying to treat that yourself. You need, very specialized equipment, because, if they're trying to defend their nest, they could attack and really seriously harm you. The Washington Department of Agriculture ordered these special beekeeping suits. They look like space suits. They're just so much more robust than the other kind of stinging insects that we have here in Delaware, that if we do have an Asian giant hornet nest, it would take some very specialized equipment and expertise to get rid of them. So if you think that you have a nest of Asian giant hornet, please report it to somebody, the Department of Agriculture or something like that. If you think that you have another type of hornet or wasp nesting around your house, there are probably some things that you can buy to take care of that.
Well, and I know that for Garden Helpline, if it's a European hornet nest, that's something, you also need to be careful with. So my usual recommendation for something like that is to contact a professional. So that's important. One other question that was asked was about spotted lanternfly. Is there anything that controls or will feed on them that helps with control?
Yeah, so there are some parasitoids. There are some insects or native or natural predators of them. The USDA and the Penn State Extension are doing a lot of research trying to find the right natural predator, but that takes years because what is typically done is you go to say the spotted lanternfly, you want to go to their natural environment in Asia to find their natural predators. Then you need to bring them over to the United States, and you have to make sure that this predator won't attack any other native species. So if you're just trying to take care of the spotted lanternfly, you want to make sure that you find a predator that will only attack the spotted lanternfly, and that research can take years. There are some natural predators in the United States. Praying mantises are one. I'm not sure about too many others. I've heard birds don't typically like to feed on spotted lanternfly, but there are some fungi that are like a natural disease to the spotted lanternfly, and some of these fungi are found in the environment in the United States. So in Pennsylvania, they've seen some spotted lanternfly death occur because they become infected with some fungal spores, and it becomes a disease. So there's also some research going on trying to use that fungus to use it as a biopesticide, so that you can actually, there are some products available that have some that are fungal spores that you can spray on the spotted lanternfly. Typically, they don't have a lot of residual effect. You need to really spray, I think, the spotted lanternfly with these products if it was to be effective. So that's really what I have to say about that. There are probably some other insects in the United States that would kill the spotted lanternfly, but not in the numbers that are needed to really control it. Right? To find those kind of predators, you really need to go back to China, camp out in the woods looking for the right kind of hornet or wasp or something like that might feed on spotted lanternflies, and bring those back and do tons of research to be able to introduce those to the environment in the United States without causing any negative effects.
And that's why invasives are so hard to deal with, because of we don't have that evolution here, and how safe is it, that kind of thing. Does anybody have any other questions for Stephen? This was great. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to the PDF, and we'll share that with everyone. Anybody have anything else? If not, let's, thank you, Stephen, again. Appreciate all your efforts to pull this together for us.